Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
Broadly speaking, what's starting to happen to the payments industry and will only, I think, accelerate is fragmentation. Fragmentation of the way you enter and exit, the way the money moves in and out of the system, the players, the actors, and so on and so forth. And as there are more and more new players and more fragmentation exists and less traditional routing methods or rails are used to move money between markets. And, I think everybody agrees that that trend will continue. We recognize that that's even going to create more complexity in being able to ship the right amount of information about the source of funds, the sender of funds, the beneficiary of funds, as those payments move across increasingly fragmented payment channels.
That was Identity CEO John Raymond, and he is our special guest this week on episode 156 of the Leaders in Payments podcast, and I'm your host, Greg Myers. An Australian native and previous casino dealer, John is passionate about people and payments. In his own words, Identity helps the global financial services industry reduce their regulatory risks without having to replace legacy technology. The Identity platform ingests payments data and standardizes it in a manner that offers an individual snapshot for each customer portfolio. This includes any missing or incorrect information that the platform will automatically reconcile, and then provide each financial institution customer with a clean set of data for analytics and accurate, timely reporting to government regulators. John says his largest competitor is the customer who believes they can do it themselves with their own internal processes and procedures. John and I go on to talk about his journey to becoming the CEO, where he sees the industry going in the next 2 to 3 years, and the 4 buckets in life that keep him at his best, both professionally and personally. We've got a great episode ahead, so let's get started. Hi, John. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast.
Hey, Greg. Thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in, and we'll talk a little more about your professional journey a little later, but let's just start a few things about you, or a little about where you're from, where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that.
Sure. I'm a father, 2 young girls, happily married, living in Sydney in Australia, live pretty close to the beach, and have spent most of my life living in Australia. I've been lucky enough to live in Canada, Japan, and the United Kingdom throughout my life. Yeah, that's where I live, and that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about the company Identity. So tell the audience what Identity does.
We help the global financial services industry reduce their regulatory risk, and critically, without having to replace legacy technology, which we recognize is a very costly, very risky, and very time-consuming exercise. Our company is uniquely focused on enhancing technology that's already in use to reduce manual processes. And the use cases that we're working on at the moment are to automate the preparation and submission of financial transaction reports to government regulators and other financial regulators in markets around the world.
Okay. And are you in a global company, so any region, any market?
Our team is predominantly based in Sydney. We have a couple of people working with us in other countries around the world, and we've got customers in Australia. We're working with MasterCard cross-border services in the United States, and we're working with HSBC in Hong Kong. So we've got a couple of flags, and of course we've got aspirations for more global markets. And I think, we're contemplating market entry into New Zealand at the moment, which has a similar regulatory framework to Australia. And we're looking at doing some work in Canada as well to help us move into the North American market.
Okay. Maybe if you could just give us a couple of use cases, if you don't mind.
Sure. I guess what we do is that we recognize, or our founders recognize, that whilst money moves around the world today fairly seamlessly, and the value of cross-border transactions is increasing, primarily as more people living on the planet, we recognize that as that money flow increases, regulators, customers, and central banks, and commercial banks for that matter, are wanting to see more and more information about each individual transaction. More information about who's sending money, more information about who's receiving money, purpose of funds, and so on. And we recognize that many of those transactions around the world today are being carried out on technology which isn't new, and that there is a growing gap between the requirement for more information, whether or not the underlying technology can deliver it. So we've got a couple of different use cases. Our platform ingests payment data into it, and it does a number of different things once it has that payment data that's ingested. The first thing it does is standardize a range of different payment messages into one single view. And then, of course, once the payment data is in one spot and once it's in one view, you can then start to give a financial institution a single view of every transaction that's done with its customers, which is really difficult, a really big problem in the industry at the moment. And once the data is in one spot, once it's in one format, it's very easy then to recognize one of the biggest issues that the regulators have with the industry around the world, which is missing or inaccurate information, like a post office box where a street address might be, an incorrect postcode, a surname twice instead of a first name and a second name. Things like these are the industry issues that we're solving for. And our platform easily identifies and repairs that. And at the end of the process, we leave the institution with a clean, clear, accurate, and complete set of financial records with every transaction they've done with their customer. And one of the, as I mentioned, we're doing a few use cases. One of the use cases is once that data is complete and accurate, it then makes it very easy for the institution to do accurate reporting to the regulators. And we've seen around the world, North America, Australia, as two examples where government regulators are starting to issue really large fines for financial institutions that aren't submitting reports that are accurate, timely, or a true reflection of what's happening in their business. So that's some of the stuff that we're working on at the moment.
And do you sell this through like a SaaS model, or is it a transaction fee model? How do you go to market?
Good question. The best way to answer that is to talk about the way the platform is being engineered at the moment and the way we're selling it at the moment, and that is a pure play SaaS model. As a young business, like many businesses, we've made a couple of mistakes. We've released some versions of our platform into on-premise delivery, where, of course, it becomes very costly and very complex to continue to maintain that. And we've recognized as frequently or as early as last year, we've recognized that the scalable future of our business relies on us having a pure play SaaS platform where we host it in our cloud environment. We own the product roadmap, and we own the features that are going to come into the platform, and that our customers just consume our services from us. And then our ability to continue to grow that platform and to continue to build features on it comes as a function of the feedback that we're getting from those customers. And we only have to do things once in the platform, and we can press buttons and provide updates, new features, service improvements to a range of different customers very easily and very scalably.
And do you go to market through a direct sales force or through a partnership channel, or both?
We're thinking about our go-to-market strategy, I guess, in 4 different ways. I think we'll always have a direct sales force in the key markets that we want to grow in. But, for example, in Australia at the moment, there are 15,000 different companies that have obligations to the financial regulator. And, to some degree, we want to be working with all of them. It's going to be pretty hard for a direct sales force to sell to 15,000 potential clients. But I think if you segmented that target market or that total addressable market, we'll have a direct sales force that probably wants to sell to, in the 80-20 principle, the top 20% of those, or potentially less, that make the lion's share of revenue and have the longest lead time for the deal. We're also working with a number of partner channel opportunities in places where we can either connect our technology to a partner and let them rapidly onboard customers on our behalf, or firms like some of the big change and accounting firms globally that might be able to aggregate customers for us. And I think the third really interesting sales acquisition channel for us is through the legal fraternity and through the law industry. Law firms in this country and in other countries are providing really pointed advice to regulated entities about how to meet their regulatory obligations and how to make sure that their business runs clean compliance programs. And there is a significant amount of opportunity for us in those relationships as well. And I think the fourth go-to-market channel for us is developing partner relationships in the technology companies that are providing services to our target market as well. So we think about our go-to-market strategy across a range of different distribution channels.
Okay, great. And we talked about countries or regions of the world that you're already in, but are there certain verticals that your solution works better for?
Look, there are many verticals where our platform will be effective for our customers. I guess I'll come back to what I said our platform does. Our platform takes disparate or fragmented payment data that sits in different systems and sometimes in different formats and different languages, and it brings it together in one place to provide an institution with a single view of everything it's doing with its customers. The vertical opportunities are significant. Some of the things that are on our whiteboard for sort of Horizon 3, over the hill and far away, and what we're thinking about the long-term future of the business. You can be talking about machine learning, AI, predictive analytics, helping the industry with trend analysis, helping financial regulators with financial crime analysis. There are many things that are possible once you have a single view of transactions for your customers. And probably more importantly, once we start to build quite a significant data set of financial transactions from a range of different customers all across the different markets that we operate in the world, some really interesting insights will be able to come out of that data. And I think that those insights will inform our future and inform which verticals we go into.
What would you say differentiates your company from your competitors out there?
Yeah, look, I think our biggest competitor is, certainly if I reflect on the sales conversations we have, if I think about the competitive forces that are in play there, our largest competitor is our customer believing that they can, or that their process works, or that they can do this themselves. And our technology is a proven and a cost-effective and a much faster and more accurate way of replacing internal processes or manual processes or internal IT projects. So look at our platform digitizes or automates an existing process. We're not talking about inventing brand new processes. We're talking about using automation to improve accuracy, speed, reduce cost, create efficiency. I think our largest competitor is the way the services are provided at the moment. There are a couple of other smaller companies, particularly in Australia, that are doing similar things to us. But I do think we've got first mover advantage in the problem set that we are contemplating solving for the marketplace, which is helping financial services businesses report to their regulators. And we've heard this from a number of financial institutions that we've been selling to or having conversations with in Australia, New Zealand, and even some of the countries around Asia Pacific. I heard as little as a week before last that from a large bank in Australia that they're doing a market scan to look for automation in this space and that they hadn't come across anything until they'd seen us. So it's a pretty cool place to be.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, where do you see the industry heading? So you can kind of frame this instead of payments holistically, kind of frame it around what you guys do. But where do you see it heading in, say, the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, look, what an exciting place to be, the payments industry at the moment. As I think broadly speaking, what's starting to happen to the payments industry and will only, I think, accelerate is fragmentation of the way you enter and exit, the way the money moves in and out of the system, the players, the actors, and so on and so forth. And I could come back to what I said earlier on, that as there are more and more new players and more fragmentation exists and less traditional routing methods or rails are used to move money between markets. And, I think everybody agrees that trend will continue. We recognize that that's even going to create more complexity in being able to ship the right amount of information about the source of funds, the sender of funds, the beneficiary of funds, as those payments move across increasingly fragmented payment channels. So I think it's going to become better for the customer because it's going to become more complex for the people that are moving money around the world. And it's going to create significant amounts of opportunity. And, we're really happy to be where we are today.
Any view, the crystal ball of 10 years from now, what things look like?
Yeah, what do things look like in 10 years from now? So some of the things that are really interesting for me at the moment, I think central bank digital currencies is really interesting. But I don't think cryptos are a currency at the moment because a currency is something you use to buy and sell goods and services. And that's very difficult at the moment to take your Bitcoin or your Ether out of your wallet and go and buy a cup of coffee. But I think we'll see, I think they are crypto commodities because people are buying them to hold and hopefully increase in value and then sell and make a profit. I'd see a world where crypto or digital does become a currency backed by central bank digital currencies and, a complete disruption of the way fiat money drives commerce around the world.
Yeah. And just, thinking about the business you're in, I would assume that you have a lot of expertise around these regulatory bodies and what they need to see across the globe. I think that's got to be a challenge in and of itself just to keep up with all of that.
Yeah, you're right. Let me talk through Australia, just the lens of Australia, and then a couple of other global markets. But in Australia, the regulator that we work with closely is called AUSTRAC, and they run a program. And I guess like most regulators in the world, they want the market to understand how they think and how they want the market to play. They are enormously proactive in working with small regtechs, early stage businesses like us. And the regulator in Australia has a regtech engagement program where we can sit in front of the regulator and talk to them about the way our product works, the way we're contemplating, the way the rules work, the way it interprets reportability and non-reportability. And they will give us advice. They're pretty good at giving us advice. So we are recognizing that there's value in building for ourselves a library of information that we are scouring the world for from regulators, and to staying up to date with that. And, we're thinking about that North American market as well, and we're thinking about that the New Zealand market as well through partnerships and being able to stay at the forefront of regulatory change. Because I think one thing is common for most regulators around the world is that the change is a constant. So rules are being updated on a regular basis. Different things are happening. And because of the way the technology works in the industry around the world, remembering I said that a lot of the financial services technology that's in use today is not new, it makes it difficult to keep up. And I think that's where a company like Identity with a cloud-hosted SaaS platform, you can never outsource your compliance obligations if you're a deposit-taking institution or if you're a regulated business, but you can certainly become faster at meeting your obligations by using outsourced services like ours.
Right. Do you play in the PII space at all? Is that part of what you do or no?
At the center of what we do, we're ingesting payment data in records that contain individual personal information. So we see personal information. Our platform sees personal information, which is why we've spent a considerable amount of time, effort, and investment in making sure that our platform meets the latest information security standards and protocols, and that we can demonstrate to our partners that we have very robust procedures and policies in place to make sure that data is ingested in a secure manner and is treated with all care and due respect. We're proud of the fact that we hold the ISO standard for information security management. I think ISO 27001, and we've had that for a couple of years now, and we're recently recertified. So the answer is yes. And we recognize that it's a very, very, very important role to make sure, a very important task to make sure that you handle that with extreme care.
Yeah. And, I bring it up because you're talking about just the knowledge you have to have around the regulatory environment. And you've got, the GDPR, but in the US, it's really, we have no national kind of similar law, right? We have a few states that are starting to pass things, but it's like, how do you keep up with all of that? How do you compare those across regions of the globe? And it just sounds like it's a daunting task to be able to do that on a global scale and keep it automated and do all those things that you guys have to do. It just seems like a huge challenge.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge, but with huge challenge comes huge opportunity. I worked in a financial services business in the United States a couple of years ago and recognized the challenges involved in the lack of a kind of a nationwide framework for financial compliance and for financial regulation, and that it's state-based. We used to joke that our financial services licenses were like the deck of cards. If you had the full stack, you had all 50 states. And
That's funny. Yeah, well, hey, that's a good segue into the next section. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about you. So maybe give us a little background, what you did before you became the CEO there. Maybe just walk us through your career journey a little.
I guess I've always sold stuff to people. Right back to my very first job when I was 17, I worked in a drive-through bottle shop just in the pub that was around the corner from our family home. I went to university. I studied commerce. And whilst I was at university, I spent a lot of time working in hospitality. So I worked in some 5-star hotels. I was even a dealer in a casino for a while for my sins, which was kind of fun. But I've always, and then I spent my 20s and 30s in the consumer electronics and retailing industry, high-end department stores, large, fast-moving consumer goods, consumer electronics. And in my early 30s, I had an opportunity to move into the financial services industry, and I joined Travelex, the foreign exchange business, and worked in their B2B business. Travelex is a business that provides foreign currency and payments to retail customers in countries all around the world. And they had a B2B business which took that supply chain capability and sold that off to other businesses that were providing similar payments and currency solutions to their customers. And I worked in that business. And I worked in that business, originally started in Australia. I moved to Tokyo to run our business across Asia Pacific. And then I ran the business in North America for a while. We had a head office in Manhattan and a distribution center in Louisville, Kentucky, which was a really interesting time. And then I moved to London to run that business globally. And at its peak, that B2B business had a couple of thousand financial institutions, large supermarkets, post offices, selling cross-border financial products and services to their customers. And we were shipping services and products to customers in 77 countries. And I finished working with those guys in 2018, and I was living in London, and took all of 2019 as a break to spend a bit more time with my kids and a bit less time in aeroplanes and living out of suitcases to support my wife as she wanted to get back to work after our 2 young girls were born. And we decided to move back to Australia at the end of 2019. And it's funny how these things happen, because my introduction to the founder at Identity was literally a phone call from a really close personal friend of ours who knew us both. And I just happened to be on the phone to him, and he said, "What are you going to do when you get back to Australia?" And I said, I don't know. I'd like to work in a high growth early stage venture because it's fun. I'd love to onboard lots of customers. I'd love to give lots of people jobs. I'd love to see a business grow and scale. And I don't know whether I want to go back into a big business and just chase last year's number and control costs and move margin. And I started working with him in 2020 to our co-founder, Nick Armstrong. And he was looking for someone to replace him as a CEO. And we worked together for a couple of months, and we met some of the shareholders and obviously worked with the team. And we decided that in March, around about 2 years ago, actually, that in around about March in 2020, that we would effect that change. And he moved on to our board of directors, and I moved into the CEO role. And I think I'm 3 or 4 days into my third year, having just notched up 2 years in the role.
Okay. Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
So what are some things you're passionate about? So maybe one work-related passion and one non-work-related passion.
My work-related passion is a passion for, or a recognition that if you value or focus your energy, particularly as a leader in a business, on your team and do that first, that they will then look after your customers, and then your business should ultimately be successful. I guess I read Richard Branson's Losing My Virginity book in my 20s, and it was had a profound impact on me. There's a guy who's built businesses all over the world, and he's very public in his opinion that look after your team and your team will look after everything else. So I'm really passionate about making sure that, wherever I am and whatever I'm doing, that I'm focused first and foremost on the employee, on our team's experience, their workplace experience. What's it like to work for us? Are we flexible? Are we understanding? Are we empathetic? Do we provide all the tools and resources required to help you be successful in the job that we've hired you to do? Do you have a good relationship with us? Is it fun to work here? Do you have good relationships with the people that are sitting next to you, and so on and so forth? And it's a really fulfilling way to run a business. I really, really, really enjoy it. There's something immensely satisfying about being able to do things for people in the workplace. Being able to say to somebody, a member of my team recently that was living in Hong Kong, and she didn't want to live in Hong Kong anymore, so we moved her to Australia. And that's had a profound impact on her and her personal life, and we were able to do that for her. And it was the right thing to do for her, and it was the right thing to do for the company. But if you're a people-first focused leadership team, I think it creates for a really nice environment. And it's a really nice way to differentiate ourselves from our competitors.
Okay, what about on the personal side? Any personal passions?
It would be easy to say my personal passions are my family and my kids. I have 2 daughters, they're 5 and 9, keep me very honest, and a wife that I genuinely think I'll be married to for the rest of my life, at least if I continue to behave myself. I'm passionate about dividing my life into 4 different areas. I won't spend lots of time talking about this, but I recognize that for me, happiness is, when I look back through the periods of my life when I've been happy and unhappy, happiness for me occurs when I take time to spend focused on myself. So, exercising, spending time on my own, going for walks on my own, just time to reflect and sit still. I also recognize that it's important to focus or spend time focused solely on family, whatever that unit looks like. For me, it's the ladies that I mentioned before and some brothers and sisters. And then spending time with friends, my own group of friends, independent of my family and independent of myself. And then, finding a vocation that wakes you up and motivates you. And I think for me, I'm passionate about making sure that I spend time across those 4 different buckets, I guess, for want of a better term, and not overloading myself in any one of them and creating imbalance and disharmony or unhappiness in my life.
I think that's a great message. I think the world would be a better place if everyone did that. I think that's a very strong message. One more question before we wrap up. So, I've been in the payments industry for, I guess, over 16 years now and kind of fell into the industry and never really got out. But a lot of people today look at fintech and they look at payments and they say, wow, there's so much money and investment and it's a hot space to be in, that they're willing to step in as, someone younger and say, hey, I want a career in this space. So what advice would you give them to be successful in their career if they wanted to come into payments or fintech and whatever discipline it is? What would you tell them that they should do to be successful?
Let me answer that with sort of 3 different pieces of advice. And I guess probably the first piece of advice is look for really smart product people. And what I mean by that is look for people that really understand in a product role. And for me, a product role is it's the glue that binds the company to the customer. It's kind of like that midpoint between the industry or the customers and the requirements and the opportunities, and being able to synthesize all of those data points into things that you can build, scale, and sell repeatedly over and over again. And if you've got great product people who understand the space and who understand what their customers are asking for, you'll end up in a business that's got a really bright future. One of my, I feel like quoting Henry Ford that said, if I'd listened to my customers, I'd have just given them faster horses.
Right.
That's an example of a really smart product person. So I'd be looking to surround myself. I'd be looking to try and work with companies that are renowned for having really clever product people. Working in the payment space, I can remember coming into the financial services industry years ago and being hit with the compliance burden and understanding compliance. It was brand new to me. I'd never, having come out of consumer electronics and consumer retailing, it wasn't really a thing. And I was really lucky that I had a great compliance partner at the time, and he took me up the curve really quickly on requirements. And I've worked with a number of different compliance people, and I guess my advice is try and find people that think of compliance as a business enabler. I think the compliance industry is sometimes unfairly tarnished that they are the sales prevention team, which is, a long way from the truth. In fact, they're just trying to keep the business safe and free of risk. But, I've met some really gifted compliance people that think of themselves as enabling functions as opposed to prevention functions. So my other piece of advice is, try and do a bit of digging about some really progressive compliance teams, because they really will enable the business to be successful. And my last piece of advice is generic. It relates to everything, which is just work hard. Just say yes, work hard, deliver before you're asked, take on more than you can do and work out how to do it, and just be there early, work hard, have fun, and just build a reputation for the guy or the girl that'll get shit done.
Yeah. I think that's all very sound advice. Well, John, we've covered a lot of ground on the company, on you and your journey, and where you see the industry heading. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, this has been a really wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you, Greg. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. What's the best way for people to learn more about the company?
We have a website, and the website is www.identitii, which is IDENTITII.com, identity.com.
Okay. And what about the best way to reach you?
You can find me at identity.com, or I'm happy to give out my email address. My email address is john@identity.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being on the show. I know your time's very valuable, so I really appreciate you being here.
Great. Thanks for having me again, Greg. It's been a fun time.
Absolutely. And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.